Welcome to the Everything's Coming Up Marketing Podcast, where we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of marketing and mental health. On this show, oversharing is caring. I'm your host, Amber Rhodes. I hope you enjoy the show. Hey, y'all. So today I'm here with Christina Mori, who handles stress by
watching reality TV, and a lot of it.
Oh my God, same. What's your favorite?
Oh, I have to say, I think Netflix reality TV shows have been pretty good lately, but Real Housewives of Potomac and of Salt Lake City are just what fills my cup.
Do you dabble with Miami?
I haven't yet. I'm still newer to Real Housewives, so I am totally looking for a third one to add to my watch list. So if that's a good one, I'll add it.
Go Miami. I didn't watch the first few seasons, but the ones that are on Peacock that are new are like incredible. They will blow your mind. I hope I'm not like overstating the impact they will have on your life, but they have really brought me out of a hole. They keep me tethered sometimes.
Oh my gosh. I will have to watch it then. Good. I need another one to add to my list. Perfect.
I wanted to ask you how you're doing.
Hey, how you doing?
I am doing okay. I was laid off uh, about a month ago, and I've just been looking for jobs, and I'm just soul searching, trying to figure out what I want to do next because I'm at a weird point where I can go in different directions. I could niche down, I could do more generalist. So that's been a process, but overall, I'm okay. Thank you.
That is good to know. Actually, I kind of want to dig into this layoff thing. I know it's kind of early in the interview, but like, let's get into it. You and I have had discussions where we were like, I'm so terrified of being laid off. I'm so terrified. And for months, we felt this way. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, you did get laid off. And then you mentioned that those months that we were worried about it, or you were worried about it, were so much worse than the actual it happening. So, can you talk a
Mhm.
little bit about that?
Yes. So over the last 8 years that I've been had a full-time job, I have convinced myself somehow that at every single job, I am going to get laid off. Regardless of economic conditions, there's just something where I doubt myself. And I just, yeah, I think that's it, what it boils down to. Somehow I doubt myself or have imposter syndrome. And so the weight of worrying about being laid off, especially over the last, I don't know, 6 months, once the economy really started um, changing, that was all way worse than actually getting laid off, which was mind blowing to me because I wish I would have known that earlier. I wouldn't have been so worried about it, knowing that the worrying was way worse.
Yeah, like when it happened, what was that? Where was the moment, or what did that feel like when you realized that the happening of it was not nearly as bad as that worrying? And how did that kind of like, what is it people say, change your brain chemistry?
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love that trend. Um, so I think when I initially realized it was going to be happening, it was about a week before it actually happened. I just put a few details together, and once enough people start having conversations internally, then you start to uh, figure things out. But for me, the first few days when I realized it was going to happen, I was not uh, not offended, but I was just like, no one's ever told me I'm doing a single thing wrong. Why is this happening? And then after some reflection, I realized, like, okay, the world doesn't revolve around me. It's not about me. It's about just the economic conditions, and that businesses have to change what they're doing to increase their runway. And so once I realized that, that was just it was so helpful for me to realize it is not about me. And also, I also convinced myself, I was telling myself the story that like once I got laid off, I was going to have to like sell my house right away. And like total panic mode. And then I realized
Mhm.
that is just anxiety talking. I can decrease my spending. I can pick up side jobs. Like, I will not have to go to the extreme right off the bat. So once I really reined my thoughts in, that was helpful too.
It sounds like you're a worst case scenario thinker, at least in this one aspect. Do you think that extends further out to other things in your life?
Oh, I think it totally depends. And also, it depends if whoever I'm having a conversation with is a worst case thinker. If somebody else is thinking, oh my gosh, this is the worst thing that's going to happen, I automatically want to even out the room. And so I think optimistically, but usually if it's just me or if I'm with people I feel like I can be totally honest with and they won't try to fix a situation, they'll just sit there and listen and be with it, then I feel like I can be the worst case scenario thinker. Yeah,
It's so easy to fall into that spiral, and from experience, I know it's so easy to fall into that spiral.
yeah, it's so true. And now I've started doing this, almost taking a step back. You know, your therapist can only tell you this for so long before you finally decide to take advice. Taking a step back and thinking, is this me or is this anxiety speaking? And so once I've identified this is actually just anxiety speaking, this isn't how I truly feel. Once I, take a second to think about it, that has been so helpful for me. And it's only something I've been doing over the last like 3 weeks. So hopefully I can keep the streak going because it's actually been very positive.
That's amazing. I wonder, how do you actually separate the you from the anxiety version of you to know which one's speaking and to know which one to actually listen to?
That is a work in progress. But to this point, I have had to really slow down as I'm thinking and like stop my thoughts. And sometimes I even have to talk out loud, which when you're driving in a car alone, it's a little awkward when you're like sitting next to people in traffic and I'm just like full on having a conversation with myself. But being able to stop my thoughts, like, and I can't remember a time in my life when I had a thought followed by a next thought. It's usually just bam, 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 like thinking so quickly where one thought like goes into the next one and I don't even realize it. So being able to like stop myself in the middle before I continue that, domino effect of thought patterns, it's something that it's like kind of building a muscle almost. It's not something I've been able to do always, but it's something I'm trying to do more.
I think that's really relatable. It's wanting to be more of an observer of your thoughts instead of just like a constant thought mill, which is what anxiety is. It's just thought after thought after thought and not nice ones, usually not nice ones.
It's so true. And I mean, because I've had anxiety for so long now too that it's just so natural to me. Like, I just am anxious and I don't even really think about it. I don't think, oh, sometimes if it's really bad, I say, oh, I'm anxious right now. But a lot of the time, I'm just like, oh, I'm just me right now. And me comes with a little bit of anxiety.
Yep. I'm curious. So we started like with the layoff, which was a
Yeah.
rough place to start. But you've mentioned anxiety, you mentioned going to therapy. So let's back it up and give it a little more context on your history with mental health, like the journey that you've taken over the past however many years. Do you mind just kind of running me through when you realized that this was something that was important to you and you started working on yourself?
Absolutely. I first realized, well, actually, when I was in high school track, which is funny because that's supposed to be like a fun after school activity and escape from having to do homework. You get to put it off for a few hours. But I noticed I was pushing myself so hard. But in the middle of like a workout, I would just start panicking. And all of a sudden, I think it was just thinking, I'm doing well in races, but right now other people are running ahead of me in practice. Like, I got to push myself harder. I can't be like this. Like, I have to be consistent. And so then I told my parents about it and like my coaches, and none of us really knew it was happening because it was, I don't know, like 2007, I think. And so mental health was talked about, but not real, at least where I was growing up, it wasn't really talked about unless it was like catastrophic emergencies. And so that was the first time that I realized it. And eventually I started going to therapy. And then I have been in therapy or on medication since so long. I think like 2007, 2008. Um, and so it's definitely, I feel like I've had different eras of therapy and like what I've talked about. And I've fluctuated between like anxiety and depression, and social anxiety got thrown into the mix there. Um, yeah, it just a few different acronyms, and I almost know like the medical codes that I write on insurance forms like by memory. But yeah, it's just a part of my life now, and I'm coming to terms with the fact that I think it always will be. So that's something I'm still processing.
I think that that's really valid, like, that there's this kind of idea in our society, I feel like, where somehow mental health is fixable. Like, the thought is that if you go to talk therapy, you get on medication, you exercise, you diet, then it can be fixed. Um, in my experience, that has not been the case. It's just I'm incrementally better at times. And then I'll take a step back and take a step forward and take a step back. And you're right, wrestling with the idea that that is a lifetime, like that's work. And it's a lifetime of work that we have to do for no reason
Hmm.
other than brain chemistry. It's a tough pill to swallow, right?
Yeah, it is. And it is something that I have like a toolbox of things I've kind of assembled, but ultimately, like I'm not going to wake up one day, just like I have bad eyesight. I'm not going to wake up one day and suddenly be able to like see my alarm clock without glasses. Like it's the same thing as mental health to me. And I have such perfectionist tendencies, and I feel guilty about a lot of things. And so that sometimes can feed into it. Like, oh my gosh, you've had such a good life. Why do you feel guilty about, like, why do you have mental health issues? And then I feel guilty about that. And it's like, there's so many cycles that I can find myself in. Um, and one thing that has helped is also hearing about other people talking about mental health and realizing gosh, we all have, battles we're dealing with.
So I agree, like that is so impactful. I think that I never really noticed people talking about mental health in a professional capacity until a few years ago. So when did you start to feel comfortable being open in the B2B space where like it's kind of scary to be honest? How did you open up to that?
Well, today is the first day.
Oh.
um, yeah,
Ah.
I've never told any of like my coworkers really that I've had like that I've said, "Oh, I'm anxious," or "This makes me anxious," but I've never said like I have an anxiety disorder. So today's the
Mhm.
day. This is my debut. Round of
Yay, you
applause.
heard it here first.
Yes.
Breaking news.
But honestly, I think what has made me feel comfortable with it is just seeing like your posts about it on LinkedIn. I've seen a few other people. And then I've heard a few of like Zoe Hartsfield's podcast episodes she's been on too, where she's very open about it. And I mean, hearing it's funny because I know there's a stigma, but I also like, for some reason, I thought there was a stigma still when it applies to me, but like nobody else, everyone else is like, just can talk about it with full comfort. But with me, apparently I don't think that way, but now I'm coming around to it. I don't know why I made that exception for myself, but yeah, that's only when I heard other people talking about it did I feel comfortable talking about it myself.
Yeah. That's amazing. I think that those people who are willing to talk about it are super brave, and I don't lump myself in that category, to be honest, because some people go a lot deeper than even I'm willing to go, and I'm pretty open. But maybe we'll get there and we'll just all get there together because we're deciding that it's not something to be ashamed of.
Yeah, I think that whenever I see someone, even in my personal life, following on social media, whenever I see someone say, I have anxiety, I want to send them a message and be like, oh my gosh, me too. Like, and actually, a few years ago, I chose to stop drinking alcohol. And people on my personal life were sending me messages and be like, I don't drink either. And it's similar for me with when people say they have anxiety or depression or social anxiety. I just want to reach out and be like, hey, me too. Like, we're part of this club. It kind of sucks and not really a great club to be in, but we're in it together.
Yeah, we're here. I have a similar feeling with, like, when I find out someone's on medication, I'm like, "Which one? Like, tell me everything. How many milligrams?" Like, I wanna know what it was like to get on it, and does it make you tired? Like, I just have such a curiosity about these things because I I'm on medication. I'm on an SSRI, and I'd previously been on a mood stabilizer, and I had just I'd never known anyone who was open about that, so my experience going through it, getting on it, was a nightmare. Like, I was nauseous all the time, I was super tired, I took naps at my desk, and I just wasn't a functioning adult, and I had no, no context to know that that was normal for that. So then at least in, like, bringing it back to the workspace, when I was at work, sleepy, couldn't concentrate, nauseous all the time, I thought I was just a bad worker. I didn't know that this could be tied to my mental illness and that explaining that to my boss at the time could actually help. So I just stayed silent, and then I got bad reviews, it didn't, and then I had to quit. I had to quit my
Hmm.
job. So, like, the pervasiveness of mental health, like, needing to take care of your mental health and having a mental illness in the workplace, I just have not seen it talked about. So I think, like, you coming out and doing this, I'm super appreciative of it. And I love, like, at least going into your next job, if you're gonna go in open about these problems. I think that problems, you know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
These these feelings, these experiences that you have that inform how you do work, I think that it will only make you a stronger employee and a stronger advocate for yourself.
Hmm. I think that's so true. At my, and I don't know why I haven't really talked about it. At previous jobs, I've never had a manager who made me feel I couldn't be 100% open. I've always worked for, I've had all female managers, and they're always so high performing that I just respect them so much. I could totally be open with them. They're the kindest people that I still reach out to and talk to. And I just, I don't know why. I just didn't say anything. But yeah, speaking of medication, that reminded me when I was at Christmas with my family, one of my cousins has I think it's like a 13-year-old dog, and they fed the dog dinner and gave her Prozac. And I was like, wow, I am on the same dosage as my cousin's dog with Prozac. This is just a new occasion for me. What a thing to celebrate. It was so funny.
I forgot that you can put, like, I knew somebody who had a cat on Prozac, and I just forgot that that was an option.
Me too. It was like, "Oh, Prozac, come on that. How much does she take?" I whatever it was the same dose as what I had. So, me and Claire, two of a kind.
Twinsies. I love that.
Ugh.
Kind of going on this thread about work and mental health, can you tell me a little bit about how your job as a marketer kind of intertwines with your experience as someone with mental illness and who's, like, always working on their mental health?
So, I think marketing has had a huge effect on my mental health, but I also think a lot of it is I have brought it I put pressure upon myself more than anybody else has put pressure on me. If I need to launch something, I have to make sure every single detail is perfect. Like, I still remember a social post, I posted it in 2019 that had a typo in it. And it's like such a small thing. And I took it down after like 5 minutes, but still, it's like such a perfectionist. I just want my work to be perfect. And I also, another big thing for me is not wanting to be a burden to my manager or even like freelance customers or clients I'm working with. I'm like, oh no, I can do that if it would mean taking one more thing off your shoulders. I'm always trying to make other people comfortable, which I'm sure has a good, it's good, but also it makes me put so much pressure on myself. And I think, especially working in marketing when so much of it is numbers based, especially for us when we're posting on social and you see 2 likes and it's been 20 minutes, you start really reeling a little bit.
Yeah. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about being on social because you mentioned the typo, and we have all had a typo moment, whether it's email, whatever. Like we've all had an embarrassing typo moment in our lives. Social has so many more opportunities, and you also do ads, right? You do some paid media.
Mm-hmm.
These all
Mm-hmm.
have so many more opportunities for public failure that other people can see and judge you on. And do you feel that when like you see a typo, it's not just, oh, I made a mistake, but I made a mistake and other people will notice.
Mm-hmm.
They'll see that.
Yes, absolutely. I think that is a huge uh, issue, and I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of like social media managers or people, even ad managers who do that, like that work that's so public, creative, designers, content writers, all of us who produce something and not necessarily just the ideas, like we're actually doing execution too. I feel like we are so much more prone to those types of critiques. And also, I think so many people think that they're marketers. And so anyone can say, oh, well, I post on social media. So I know just as much as my social media manager. And while I'm sure they have great posts, that's very different from being day in and day out, like involved in something like social or writing emails or writing blogs or writing ads. And so that is a line also that has been extremely interesting to navigate.
It has the opportunity to feed into imposter syndrome. I think like
Mhm.
you could react one of two ways, or in my mind, I react one of two ways, which is that I'm either offended or I'm like, oh my God, you're right. I don't know what I'm doing.
Yes, that is exactly it. Same here. And if I get offended too, I feel like I don't get as offended on certain things anymore. But if I come up with this like very creative, non-traditional idea for something, and if I presented it to um, my boss, and she was so accepting of it, and like, wow, let's try that. Like, might as well test it out. And hearing that, it just made me feel empowered to be more creative because I felt like there was a space where that like type of thinking could be encouraged or accepted almost, as opposed to if someone in the like I've worked at companies in the past where someone just says, oh no, like that's kind of, let's not do that, let's just save that, keep that one in the ideas bank.
Put that one in the parking lot.
Yeah, that one's gonna sit there.
What else kind of empowers you to, let's say, like tackle some of those insecurities that you have or the things that bring you imposter syndrome?
I think something that has helped is just talking to other people in marketing about when they feel that way too, or even if I've had managers or bosses who have been open about that feeling too. That like, I don't know why I assumed when you get to a certain level of seniority, you just feel so confident, um, which is not the case. But having other people be open and talking about it has been so helpful for me. And also recognizing that in marketing, there's not always like a right perfect way to do something. There's like four different ways to arrive at the same answer. And so accepting that and realizing ultimately we're all aiming for the same thing. We all want the same thing. We're just choosing different paths to get there, whether it's a campaign idea or even like a channel that we're using. Like we're all trying to do the same thing, and just my idea isn't any less valid than somebody else's. I think time helps
Yeah.
too. Like I feel like now I feel this is the first time applying for jobs where I feel like, oh, like I know what I'm talking about. In the past, I always felt like, oh, well, I could learn so much more. And while that's true, I could always be learning, and I hope to always be learning. Now I feel confident enough in my ability to make recommendations and in the interview process, and just feel confident in what I'm saying, which happy I got here. Wish it came a little bit sooner, but it's a good change.
Yeah. It's that phenomenon, I guess, when you look back at yourself when you're younger, when you thought that you knew everything and you're like, "Oh, I didn't know a single thing." Like, I knew absolutely nothing.
Mhm.
Nothing at
It's
all.
so true. It's so true. And even sometimes just witnessing, like, I don't other people do work too. I'm like, "Wow, I just things like, I wonder if I would have thought like that strategically when I was that age," or just being impressed by, like, other people's work, regardless of age or seniority, has always made me reflect on my own work. I'm like, "Wow, is that I guess I kind of came up with an idea like that too," but just I don't know. I'm always trying to benchmark myself, which is probably an issue, but I'm very thinking. I have a what's it called? A rich inner world. I was reading the other day when I was reading like what a highly sensitive person was, and so I'm like, yep, that's me. Just trying to figure myself out.
Oh my goodness. Tell me more about this highly sensitive person. I've heard this before and I believe I would categorize myself as one of these people, but I would love to hear from you. It sounds like you've been researching about it.
Yes, and I read a book about it too. I just feel like I've always felt so much, like, to the point where I don't know if other people, like not well, obviously others do, but not everyone feels like this. Like, everything affects me very deeply. Like, when I even like, I'm empathetic, but in a way that other people's, like, struggles affect me. Like, if I know, for example, like if I know my husband's not feeling well, I just like or is dealing with something in his job, I just like obsess over it, and like I feel that. I feel that just as much as he does. Well, I guess I can't measure that, but it feels pretty strong. Um, but in other people, like when other people experience loss, like I just feel like I am crushed by that too. And I just take on a lot of other people's feelings. But another trait I think of being a highly sensitive person is like you're very detail oriented and you're very observant. And that's one thing that I've noticed in the workplace that comes out for sure. I've always tried to observe everything around me and understand the subtext or what's not being said, or yes, someone said this, but their body language was different. So I think that absolutely affects me in the workplace too. Um, do you feel any of those things?
I do, and I think some of it I have always chalked down to anxiety. Like,
Mm,
if if I'm asking someone to do something, I will over communicate what they need to do. I'll like way too much information, because I know how I would want to be approached with an assignment, and it would be with all of the information that's possible to like to finish it, plus some like extra information. And then I also my understanding of highly sensitive person from a few years ago, so it might not be correct, is that sometimes it comes down to even just, like, your surroundings. So, like, I can very distinctly remember one time I walked into a Walmart, and it was so loud and so bright, and I was like, "Nope, nope, 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 nope," and I turned around and left, and that was kinda my first, like, "Oh, you're sensitive to lights and sounds sometimes," like and even recently I was at an offsite and we were in a pizza restaurant and it was so loud, and I was so overwhelmed, and we had spent all day talking to people, like, just socializing, and then I just started crying in front of, like, 30 of my coworkers, and I was like, "You know what? This is just where I'm at in life right now." And
Yep.
I'm just sensitive to these things, and I can relate to feeling other people's pain, but I don't feel it so deeply. I'm not like I don't take on that much. I take
Mhm.
on my pain very deeply, and, I try to separate myself from other people's, but, there I can relate in some ways to what you're talking about, and it does affect how I do my job. It can mean more work for myself as well.
Yes, I've created like when onboarding agencies in the past, I create like this 3-page document. It's nuts. That's like these are my competitors, these are why they're the competitors. This is the history of the business. Like maybe they could just they'll figure that out. But I like list the history of the business and I list like I just give so much documentation that it's probably overwhelming and not enjoyable to read. But what you said about like an environment too, I have felt the same way. Usually for me, it's like if I hear an ambulance go by and I'm like walking, it is the loudest thing I have ever heard, and I feel it in like my body. I'm like, that was loud. Like that's louder than I've ever heard it before. And so, yeah, you feel a little unsettled after, but yeah, it's just another thing to add to the list.
Sometimes, though, at least from my perspective, I'm interested to hear if you agree. Being able to put a name to these big feelings and like things that we haven't been able to categorize, it doesn't solve anything, but it helps. It makes me feel more empowered. What about you?
I think so. It really does. And even one thing is kind of funny. It sounds so silly, but even being on TikTok has made me realize that I've never had an original experience ever. Like people post things. The other day, I saw someone post something, and it was a video of them paying like very like tons of attention when you're on a plane and someone's demonstrating the safety routine and they wrote like I listen so hard and I make sure they know I'm listening because I feel bad nobody else is. And I was like, oh my gosh, I do that. Or like if I'm on it like at an event or a round table and I want to leave, like I don't because I feel bad. What if I leave and like it's they lost someone and what if they think it's them and not me? Oh, it's just like I could go so quickly down these rabbit holes, but it's not all about me, and that's realizing that has been pretty helpful.
That is helpful. I get you though on the like going to a panel or whatever, especially in person. Not only will I not leave, I will make direct eye contact and I'll be like, "Uh-huh." Like, I need them to
Yes,
know that someone is listening when it's like, they don't care. Maybe they
right,
do, but not really. They're doing this for their own thing. Like, our presence does not determine the success unless we're the only person in the room. Then
right.
what if we left?
It's so true. It's so true. No one else is thinking about it as intensely, and yeah, it's very true.
So it sounds like you are going to a therapist now. Is this correct? Is
Yes.
this someone that you've been seeing for a while?
Yeah, since pre-pandemic, probably even 2 years pre-pandemic, so 5 years, I think, 6 years. It was funny, I only started going to her because the therapist I was seeing before, we were only seeing each other, it sounds like dating, but we were only seeing each other for a few months, and one time at the very last appointment, she said, "Well, maybe you're not ready for therapy." And I was like, "Well, that's not very nice." And I switched to my current therapist, who's lovely.
I think that, like, when you start therapy, if you've never done it before, you don't know the barriers of entry are kind of so difficult. Like, to the point where your first therapist, second therapist, third, you might not like them. Like, they might
Mhm.
suck, like, you might not vibe with them, and unless you know that that's normal, then you might give up too soon.
Oh, yeah. You're like, "Is everybody like this? This isn't." I'm not interested in like I feel like they don't understand me or something like that. You think, is everybody like this? Will they all treat me like this or look at me when I'm explaining this thing that happened in my life? But finding the right one is such a game changer.
Yeah. Like, if someone told me that they don't think I'm ready for therapy, I would be like, "Oh, I failed therapy? Like, that's it for me."
I know.
She sounds maybe
That's
not so nice.
Yeah, yeah. It was not a good fit, but that's how I felt too. I was like, "Thank goodness I've been in this thing before, and I know that I've been in therapy, and I'm gonna keep being in therapy, or else she would have really discouraged me."
Is there anything that you've worked with your therapist, specifically with work that has made you stronger, like, made you feel like just a better employee and also a better person? That might be too personal.
No, that's I think the main thing for me is when I explain situations and she validates my feelings, that makes me feel more confident in how I'm feeling. And it makes me feel like I'm not crazy. It's like, no, I'm justified to feel this way. And so that in itself has helped me. Just knowing that she is she's on the same team as me and she's like, well, no wonder you felt like that because of when you were at this job or when you did this is how they treated you, and it's continually affected you. And so that has been very helpful.
I'm curious about your experience with you were laid off. Sorry to keep saying it, but now you're getting to look for a new job. And I say get to look for a new job because you have this opportunity to find just like the perfect fit for you and do a really intentional search. And you've told me a little bit about this, but can you dig a little bit more into how you're doing that and how you're going to let this like guide your mental health and make sure that you have a healthy relationship with work moving forward?
Hmm. There's a few things that I'm considering. A lot of my interviews have asked me, what are you looking for in a workplace? And so I usually, the same things I always say, like I want leadership team that's transparent. I want to understand like what are our company goals? How is marketing contributing to that? What are the expectations? Things like that have been important. But one of my former managers, who I've been speaking with a lot lately, has she said something to me about how they treat you during the interview process is how they'll treat you when they hire you. And so there's just some conversations I've had that have just made me curious about, oh, okay, is that how they really feel? Or is that how they typically operate? And so just things that have been almost just little markers that I think, okay, well, that's something to dig into on the next call. And what I'm looking for too is I I'm very passionate about my job. Um, and I think that I can get very consumed with work pretty easily. To-do lists, they're never ending. Sometimes I think, okay, well, if the problem is I just need more time to do it, not like I need to spend more money to do it, okay, I can do that. I can handle that. And so if you say yes to enough things, then ultimately you have no time. So I'm looking for people that have realistic expectations of what marketing can do, who believe marketing is a not a cost center, it can change your company and redefine your company. And so those are a few things I'm looking for, but it's been interesting just seeing what's out there right now because there is a recession and seeing there's so many good candidates on the market right now. So it does make you doubt yourself a little bit, but yeah, it's been interesting.
I'm going to ask you a tough question, and I had to ask myself this question. Do you feel so tied to your job that when you don't have a job, you lose some of your identity?
Ooh, that is a good question. I would say if I'm freelancing right now, so I don't feel like the true total, like I have nothing to do when I wake up. And honestly, I feel like I have looking for a job has I've spent more hours looking for a job and preparing for interviews and like writing out answers to questions and researching who's at the company. So I every day from 9 to 5, sometimes even like later, I'm working on prepping. So I don't have time really to like think about that, which I had to schedule time for myself. I think it was this past Monday, and I said that I'm not taking any calls. I'm not doing any interviews. I'm not even opening my laptop. It's a me day, and I'm just gonna take the entire day to read or go for a walk. And that was the first time I had taken a break since, like, during the work week since January 11th, and so a month, a little over a month. So I don't feel like I've lost my identity. However, if I were to step away from work for whatever reason, for maybe like 3 months, 6 months, I would definitely feel that way. If it's prolonged, I would feel that way. How about you?
It's interesting. I listened to a podcast called, I think it was called The Growing Edge or The Growth Edge, and it was someone who was aging, and so much of his life he had spent doing things that were physical, like going on hikes, and it had made him kind of question, who am I if I can't do this thing I love? And then the guest was similar, like she had gotten very sick and she could no longer work, and she had to grapple with, I cannot work, so who am I? And who am I without this thing that has been so much of a big part? And I only bring this up because I think of you as a kindred spirit. And I feel like we come from a same point of view where, like, we can't let ourselves stop.
Mhm.
And if if that's the case, who are we when we do stop? And I'm just asking big questions and I don't have any answers. And this is just like a question I want to probe more for myself. So I was just curious. I hope I don't like send you into a spiral or anything.
I have like this existential crisis when we hang up. No, I think that's a very good, that's something I'm always thinking about is because my husband is he has so many hobbies. And I'm like, do I have hobbies or do I just have things that I like to do at the end of the day to try to turn my brain off after work? And I just do them because I know they work. And so I'm always trying to think of like, what do I enjoy and what do I enjoy and actually like makes me feel good? Because sometimes sitting on the couch for 6 hours just, it's nice, but it doesn't make me feel good. And deciding those things has definitely helped me define who am I? What do I like to do? I feel like it's a question I'm always answering.
Yeah, and I think you're not the only one. I'm not the only one where, especially I think in marketing, you're a marketer first, right? It's like you almost can't do a single thing. You can't look at an ad on TV, or you can't like look at a newspaper without judging the font. Like there's just these
Mhm,
things that you're always doing, and it does become a part of your identity, your job. So it was just a question that I've been noodling on for a while, and I think we're as marketers really likely to just kind of fall into this trap.
mhm, and I think that can probably contribute to burnout too. If I'm thinking about this constantly, and if I see something and I'm always thinking of it from the marketer point of view, it's like I'm really not turning my brain off or thinking about other things. And that's hard. It can be hard for me to turn my brain off after work. Sometimes I have really great ideas that happen outside of 9 to 5, but trying not to constantly think about work is always a work in progress.
Yeah, it's more work to not think about work,
Mhm.
unfortunately. I I would love to hear your words of encouragement for other people right now who, like, maybe they're struggling or maybe they're doing okay, but they are caring about their mental health. What would you say to them?
I would say, and someone told me this once, but if it's not going to matter 5 months from now, don't stress about it. Like, I know that's so much easier said than done. I feel like I'm the person who's saying, yeah, just go outside and you'll feel great. Like, all your mental health issues will feel better if you go for a walk. But really, thinking about, will this matter? I don't remember most things that I was so stressed and so worried about in most of my jobs over the last 8 years. I don't remember what like the worst thing ever that I felt in the moment. I thought, how am I going to figure this out? And now I don't even remember what those were. So that's one thing. And then also reaching out to other people has been helpful. And that's something I still need to get better at is if I see someone talking about mental health on LinkedIn or something like that, it can be vulnerable, even if you're used to doing it. And so I think that's one thing that has made me feel better. And I want to do a better job of like letting people know that it does mean a lot to read their stories. Um, and then acknowledging my own feelings are valid. Everyone should try to, I know it's different from how we usually think, or at least how I've usually thought, but usually in the past, when I've had a thought about, oh, I don't like how I do this, or I don't like that this is happening, just sitting with it for a minute before you judge, before you try to fix something, just accept, hey, I feel that way right now. No, it's not fun, but that's how I feel that way. And that's how I feel right now. That is another muscle that I'm trying to build, but it's been helpful so far. I'd say those, and then reach out to anyone. You can DM me anytime. I love talking about mental health. So I think there's more people out there that are struggling and are willing to talk about it than you would ever think.
Yes, I think you're right, and it just takes a few voices to start saying it, and then more and more people are gonna start talking about it openly, and then we'll feel a lot more comfortable just in our workplace, like, saying what we need, and I think it's a really exciting time because I think more and more people are starting to open up, like you.
It's true. And I love that you're made a podcast to give people space to open up and talk about it because it really, it's something that's so needed. And I think especially now when we had COVID and then the post pandemic and now the economic uncertainty, it's like one after another after another. And I think people are feeling it. And so just creating a space where people can join or even just listen in and know they're not alone in their feelings. I love it. I can't wait to see where this goes.
Me too. Could you end us on your favorite joke?
Yes. So mine is more a saying than a joke. And this could be just my odd sense of humor. But I saw this quote the other day, and it was growing up is just realizing that your entire family is mentally ill. And that to me, it's not a joke, but I really resonated with that. And it helped me look back and say, "Oh, yep, that was anxiety," or "Oh, yeah, that was it." So it's not so much a funny haha joke, but it is a funny as in ah, I realize what happened.
Think it's funny to those of us with mental illness, and we're like, "Oh, yeah, it totally is."
Very true. Very true. If you're in the club, you'll get it.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I'm gonna put your information in the show notes, and if there's anything else that you want me to share, just let me know, and listeners, you can check those out. So, follow Christina on LinkedIn and, give her a talk to her, give her a DM or something, and let's talk about mental health, let's talk about anxiety, and just open up a little bit more. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.